We are excited to hear from Elaine today. She's going to talk about how to teach writing for digital media and specifically touch on brand voice and social media. And so Elaine Venter is an assistant professor of mass communication at Colorado Mesa University, where she specializes in teaching techniques and tools for digital media, such as writing and audiovisual production for social media, content creation and curation, and social media listening. We're excited for Elaine's presentation to talk about brand voice and social media. So Elaine, I think we're ready to rock and roll. I'm going to jump away. Once again, use the hashtag. We have Elaine's socials here, so feel free to tag her. So when she's done, she can jump in and participate there as well. But Elaine, the time is yours.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I was just posting. We'll see how this talk goes, because while Karen gets to drink up on that masala chai, I have had to recently quit caffeine. So I'm running this without caffeine. We're going to see how this
Good
goes.
luck.
So far, it seems okay. I'm running on peanut butter here. So we'll see what happens. But hi, everyone. Welcome. It's great to have you all here. It's fantastic to be a guest of StuKent. This is my first Digital Summit guest talk. So super honored, and hopefully some of you can take something from this talk. And I've definitely been taking a lot already from Karen's talk, and also from all of your notes you've been putting here in the chat. So thank you so much. Anything you have to say, just pop it in there. A little bit about myself. I started teaching here at Colorado Mesa University about 3 years ago. So I adopted this course that is our main digital media crux course. I come from a PR advertising background. So my background was a lot more in writing than it was content creation specifically. When I graduated in 2007, a lot of these things didn't exist. Facebook was barely being used for business. Twitter wasn't really a thing yet. And so it's been an interesting thing for my students to actually have courses in this and teaching them in a way that delves into a world that was both non-digital, but also very much digital. And so that's what I've been dealing with mostly. My motivation for focusing on writing, especially over the last year and a half, or closely 2 years now, has been this idea of, we constantly hear video content is king. Video content is really the way to draw people and interest people. And I'm not disagreeing with it. In fact, I actually do agree with it. I often click on video content and find that draws me in. But oftentimes, I'm also finding for the context and the captions. And myself, I'll admit to having been caught in the digital media frenzy of creating the hippest and most awesome video content and awesome and great GIFs or GIFs, however you want to say it. You know, peanut butter got in on that too. So that's how that goes. But sometimes, and I realized when students came to me for work, for employee applications that they were doing, students were running to me with these forms where they had 24 hours to create social media copy. That was it. Not video, not even photo. In fact, one employer, possible employee for a student, had just described the kind of video content or photo content that would go with your copy. But essentially, they were very worried about the written aspect, the actual copy for the Facebook post, the Twitter, the tweet post, or for Instagram, whatever that would be. And more than that, some of them gave them many different options. One particular student came with 5 to 10 different scenarios for different brands. They weren't for this brand themselves, but for brands that were either related or just different brands that they wanted to test their kind of creativity. So when Karen definitely mentioned there about the random selection for creativity, we'll talk about that as well. And so I realized I've been focusing so much on the technical aspects. Here's your character counts for Twitter versus Facebook versus Instagram, how many hashtags you should use. What we'd really forgotten was the core of communication always comes back to the written word and having to focus again on the basics of writing. And so that's what I've been bringing in. A little bit of background and context. is Dave here saying they're worried because most students just aren't English written proficient yet. And there's a really interesting aspect that we should mention that, which deals into my context for my class, which here is Maths 441 Emerging Media, the course description, experimentation via tools, techniques, and concepts of social and new media resulting in the creation and management of online content in the form of social media, posts, blogs, podcasts, etc. But what specifically is missing? See if anybody can quickly figure this out. What word is specifically missing? Or see if anybody want to give a go at it. That's right. Ready. Writing. And the fact is, for me, it makes obvious, right? When I think of social media, social media posts, I immediately think of writing. But I forget that the generation in which I was raised, writing was core and central, especially if you were in public relations or advertising. You were trained how to write from very early on and full on. The general ecology has shifted, especially with public relations and marketing as fields converging consistently. We've had this deal with students need to be able to create content and manage data and all those aspects. And oftentimes, though, in this day and age, because students have grown up so digital, they find this idea of social media posts almost automatically equals video or photo. And so it's been a very interesting shift. It's one shift that I've made to change this course description to now include writing specifically. So one thing that we have to start with in this class is when we talk about writing is we have to define brand voice specifically, since at the end of this class, it culminates in a branding project. Now that branding could be a personal branding project or for a client. They get a choice in that. However, I have taken notes from Dr. Sutherland about how I want to try out some stuff next semester. But for now, what we have is we have a lot of students who come in with a lot of passion projects. They already feel like they know what they want to do and how they want to do it, especially since this class is more of a junior, senior level class. And it's mostly mass communication students. We've started getting marketing students right now, but most of our students are mass communication, and most of them are video. Most of them are television broadcasting, or they want to create their own video businesses and things like that. So they're already prone to video content already, but having them learn how to handle their own social media and as soon as I get into, okay, what's the identity of your brand? What do you want to be known for? They just said, making good video. And some of them even do this with me. Yeah, like that's going to cover it. I'm like, okay, great. But what's your brand voice? So first, before we get into writing specifics, we get into brand voice. So, and I actually take here from Dr. Karen Freeberg, her great book, Social Media for Strategic Communication. I love her definition here for the brand voice embodies the personality characteristics that are unique, memorable, and authentic to your brand. Each brand has their own voice, characteristics, and history that are tied to their entity and that make them memorable to their key audience. I especially like this addition of history because when it comes to writing for social media, and writing for a social media brand, this question that I pose the students is, can the writing change over time and should it? It's an interesting question posed. Some of them kind of freeze up. Most of them think I'm asking them trick questions, which is true. But in some of these cases, I'm not. So I really like that idea of everything comes with a history. It comes with a certain type of characteristic, a personality. So we begin to develop that. As soon as we have brand voice identified, we move into going back to the English basics. I actually have drawn a lot from English as a field of study to ground our first couple weeks. And it's anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the demographics I have of the class. So each semester, the class is different. While we do have predominantly video students, we only have 1 or 2 prerequisites for this class. So right now I have the first sophomore in this class, hasn't had a lot of writing experience, more interested in video, but I do have some social media specific students. Most of these students have taken 1 English class at this point. It's our 1 course core requirement. So for many of them, it's been up to 2 to 3 years before they take this course again. And for only those students who've been in public relations and journalism and taken those specific courses, have they had writing. However, they've forgotten, I wouldn't say they've forgotten, but we focus a lot more on techniques and technical aspects and forget about really focusing on the creative aspect of writing. So coming to this literary writing 101 the style, syntax, and tone. And within syntax, I also put in diction. Those 4 aspects we focus on a lot in terms of thinking about them, defining them, and then actually examining them within social media to help students develop, identify, first of all, their own natural voice, how they write naturally, and then a constrained voice, a voice that they have to write in that has very set parameters where they're not writing for their personality, but writing for someone else's. So going through all of these, for style, we have to address the 4 main different styles that exist for them. For example, expository, descriptive style, persuasive style, and narrative styles. And it's one thing when we actually state what these different styles are. It's another thing when we now actually move into the application of this. And so this is how I've tried to blend in my own field and English and different aspect things and marketing as well. We do a project of social media listening. However, whereas social media listening is typically analyzing the conversations and trends, for this particular exercise, I asked students to only listen for the brands, once again, the style, the syntax, and the tone. So we do explain later, we do go into later into other social media listening exercises specifically, but for this one especially, you have to clarify that you're only looking at the writing specifically. You don't care about people's replies right now. You don't care about different trends necessarily, but trends do come up in terms of trends of writing and trends in tone and things like that, but we're looking specifically at writing. So yes, while I do have the Wendy's example here, it exemplifies what we do. I split my students up into groups, and it's typically about 2 to 3, depending. One semester we'll have a small group of 15. The next semester we'll have a large group of 25. So you can change this however you need to. And then I do this one of 2 ways, depending on how large or how small it is and how much time we have. If we had to spend a lot of time focusing on English Literary 101 background, then what we'll do is we'll split everybody up into a group. They get to pick a brand, any brand, and then they have to cover the writing from each platform from that brand, or at minimum 3. Actually, at minimum, what we've done recently is 2, and then we'll cover a 3rd one usually. But most large brands have anywhere between 3 or more profiles from platforms that they're working from. So we split them into groups, and then they can pick this. And then each group has to present. They actually have to present the brand that they selected, why they selected the brand. They have to give a small overview of what they have identified the brand identity and personality is. And then they walk us through the different platforms. They walk us through the different posts, having to identify specifically the tone, syntax, and style of each post, looking at the specific word choice that they've made to create specific kinds of tone and aspects like that. And even how it plays in relationship to audio and visual, if it is an audio-visual post. And then they examine that through each platform. Wendy's, and the reasons why I bring up Wendy's is an example that always comes up. Almost every semester I've had at least one group always select Wendy's. But what's interesting and what's fun about this then is, and presents that when they really start to think about platform and writing and which platform works for what kind of writing especially. It's a 2-tiered assignment. What they find oftentimes is that many of them have this idea of Wendy's, but actually only Wendy's Twitter. When they go and they examine Wendy's Facebook, some of them have found some similar tone. There'll be some posts that are, as the students have called it, savage. For their Twitter, they'll say that they're full savage, really attacking, for example, other brands like McDonald's right now is their big brand right now that they're going after for the breakfast menu. But what they found on Facebook was that it was toned down. There were some posts, but they weren't directly going for McDonald's necessarily. They call them out, but it wouldn't be as harsh or something like that. They'd be fun, but not as fun or sarcastic as they could be on Twitter. Instagram as well had a similar kind of view where it could kind of be like Twitter, but also somewhat toned down in playing with more memes and Twitter memes that were popular there. And so what's become interesting there is that now not only does this exercise play a role in helping them really focus on writing, but at the same time, we can begin to talk about platform techniques. Why did they choose those particular type of words for this particular platform? And then we go into questions of demographics. What's the demographics for Wendy's on Facebook versus Twitter versus Instagram? Then how does that directly play into the type of copy that you're writing, if any at all, but also balancing at the same time this overall grand brand identity. And so this can go on for anywhere up to a week that we have this full conversation before we then culminate into, oh, I'm sorry, I have some examples that some of the students have pulled. For example, this is one post from Facebook and one post from Twitter. We over here making it hard to choose, and then of course it's a GIF post. Whereas on Twitter, Wendy's breakfast got me like, and I believe that's the kick dancing emoji, and the students are like, yeah, that's very much in tone with Twitter. It's more playful, it's more fun, you can have emojis more there, things like that. This was one of the least scathing tweets selected, and then of course we have to, if we're going to talk about Wendy's on Twitter, we've got to put in, and I love the way they say it, the savage posts, here lies mediocrity, hashtag egg RIP muffin. Oh, we have a big blast with this. And what was interesting too, in terms of, this is an epitaph, what would go on there. And students didn't even realize that this is something that, it's a style of writing that exists outside of Twitter, and we bring it on there. So it's been interesting for them to play with different creative writing styles by examining different brands. We do also make it clear that local brands can be an option. I saw that many of you were listing here that you had nonprofits that you work with, which is fantastic. And I find that if you do not make it a point of emphasis for students that they can select local and or nonprofit brands as well to examine, then most of them will actually default to larger corporate brands, which is great, it's fine, but corporate brands can take chances in ways that local brands cannot necessarily, depending. And that is a conversation that we end up having as well, in terms of how your writing is affected about the kind of level of brand that you are as well. So this then culminates into several different kinds of assignments. Most of the assignments look like this in terms of the Facebook post, the Twitter post, and the Instagram post. We also have a blog assignment that we do as well. So when it comes to the actual social media posting, I give them 2 posts that they have to complete for each platform. One, they get to be fully creative. It's a freedom kind of post that they have, sort of. The second is a branded post. So the way that the first post works is most students don't even recognize or cannot identify brand voice because they cannot identify their own. And that's one of the biggest difficulties I have in terms of asking these students, what's your writing style? They don't know. So it becomes more difficult for them to experiment and play for brand voice because they haven't yet figured out their own. So this first post is actually supposed to be a way for them to kind of identify how they write naturally. And when I say that they have a sort of freedom, it's because I have to give them a theme. There has to be a certain set of parameters. They get to be creative within a set of ideas. So for example, the first theme is write about a social media holiday post, but you get to write it in any way you want to. Whatever writing style speaks to you, whatever voice speaks to you. Is that your voice, or is this another particular kind of voice that you write in? For those students who are advanced and are very well aware of their voice already, I challenge them to then try and write a different kind of voice that's still within their style, within their particular tone, but a very different kind of voice. So for example, I have some journalists who are more into hard style, hard news. So I ask them, write something that's a little bit more fun. Think of it like a feature piece post that you're writing on social media. And it's interesting to see them play with that. The second post has the more strict parameters. They have to actually select a brand. And here I let their passions mostly speak for themselves, because it's easier for students to develop a concept of brand voice initially when they are given something that they are attracted to, something that they resonate with. And so the branded post, I don't select brands for them. They can select a brand, any brand, but then they have to do a write-up. It's about a 250-word write-up where they write about the brand, why they selected the brand, and what's the brand identity, an overall characteristic overview. Once again, it's just a re-emphasis of what we did in the actual group lecture work that we did in class. Now they do it again, but this time they have to utilize that information to then examine brand posts. And what they have to do is they get to select one platform, just to keep it simple, select one platform, and they have to create a post that for all intents and purposes, that if I were to look at that post, I would say, yes, that fits exactly on that brand's feed. I would not even be able to think that someone else wrote this. If I were to see this, I would not say such and such student wrote this post. And what was interesting was more the challenge that I realized this would be. So for example, on this particular slide right here, when we look at these two slides, if I were to ask you to identify which of these posts actually appeared on BMW USA, let's say that one specifically, do you think it was the one on the, well, it's on my left, or the one on the right? Oh, wait, see if anybody can guess and say, no, nobody go and check their Instagram right now. That would be cheating. Oh, interesting. Okay, we have a few. Moments of luxury, right? Yeah, right. Of course, that's a beautiful poetry almost there. So yes, so actually the one on the left is officially from the brand page, but there were some of you who selected some on the right. And I think one of the reasons actually gives it away is the text as well, the text style and the writing. If you look at the text style here, that's very much the font and format that they able to get there. Whereas this one you could tell is from our students one here. But for those of you who thought even though the left, did you have a moment of pause to think maybe the right could have been? Not sure, seems like it. What gave it away that it was absolutely the left? Cole, yes. So that's actually one of the things I talk to my student about. The lighting for the picture. Oh, interesting. So actually the image is something they selected directly off of BMW's pages, one of their web pages, and selected there. But Cole, yes. And so that was interesting because while their syntax is actually really good, the Cole that fuels your passion, right? And moments of luxury. Both of them have a very similar syntax in terms of being a very poetic almost type of style. So there they nailed it. But it was the word call that gave it away. And yet I still selected this as an example because of what the student went through actually. I did not think this assignment was going to cause so much pain and suffering, but apparently it did. This one particular student is a very excellent journalist student, can write very well in opinion style and things like that. But they struggled for over 2 hours to write this one aspect. And they said it was for them trying to get it just absolutely right. And yes, the word call was a bad selection, but the something that fuels your passion, the rest of that was great. And we talked about how that was part of being aware of the brand's latest movement into more energy efficiency and things like that. However, for the US, for Instagram, for US BMW page, this actually still works. If it was Europe, for example, or their main page, no, call would definitely be ripped out. And so, for example, what was interesting was that they said that when they created their own post, it was almost too easy. They thought that it was a trick assignment that I've given them. They were able to create a post in less than 2 seconds and said, oh, great, now I'm going to be able to succeed in social media because I can create my posts in 2 seconds or less. Venta said we should be able to create our posts, in less than 24-hour turnaround for a whole bunch of them. In 5 minutes, we should be able to create a bunch. I maybe put a little too much pressure on them than I should. But then he struggled for over 2 hours to just even come up with this. And it was something that was common. A lot of the other students came to me saying it was easy for them to finally realize to have this freedom of writing. Some of them wrote poetry. Some of them wrote haikus. Amazing. Others wrote more freeform, simplistic. Others wrote more traditionally marketing style language. But when it came to writing for a very particular brand, many of them struggled in terms of being able to identify the key characteristics and then selecting that key copy that would make it right. And so, for example, that's why I'm going to continue actually working on these. What we've done is I've actually further gone into this assignment by adding it into the blog posts as well. We have weekly blogs that our students have to complete for 441. However, now we've shifted it, whereas they get a lot of freedom in the blog posts initially. All blog posts will provide them with freedom. They can write about whatever they want to. If they already have an idea of what kind of industry they want to go into, I urge them to start writing blog posts for that. But there's one blog that they have to write in the entire semester that has to be a branded blog. So very much like this, where they have to create branded social media, they have to go and examine the different blog posts for different brands and write a blog post that could fit. Interesting enough, I actually found students had a lot less trouble having blogs that fit brand voice versus social media posts. And I wonder if it's because when it comes to blogging and the nature of certain blogging, it's not necessarily less visual, but there's a less focus on the video and the photography elements. And so their minds were already set to writing versus social media, where many of them still want to focus predominantly on the photo and video first and then the copy. So that's been something interesting there. But I do emphasize for them to have at least a freedom post that allows them to write about anything, because that's how a student really develops a knowledge of their own style, their own voice. And that's really going to help them then in terms of when you have something like Dr. Sutherland's class, where you have a random selection, where they can able to really pull on their own writing style as a baseline, but push to be creative and adapt that voice with the knowledge of social listening to look at a brand specifically and identify who that brand is and what kind of words and phrasing fits specifically not only for that brand, but that specific brand platform that they have to focus on. And that's really what I have there at this moment, what we've been focusing on for 441. You can contact me here at my email, or as they said, follow me on social media. But at this point, what I was really hoping is to open it up to questions, concerns, even ideas that someone else has. I saw a lot of notes were coming in here. So anything that we can draw on here. Ooh, every single, yes, Meg, every single week there is a post. Mind you, that's about the students' reaction as well. But the reason I do that is because, for example, many of them haven't had an English course in over 2-3 years. And many of our mass comm classes are project-based courses where they've been creating a ton of video and audio content that they've lost this focus on writing. And so, yes, I really hit them hard with writing exercises pretty much weekly. If we've had something that's a lot, so for example, we do have a social media branding exercise where they actually get to brand our department's socials, then I'll take away a blog post here and there. But essentially in our 17-week course, let's see, they end up writing anywhere between 10 to 13 blog posts in total. That does not include the branded blog post, and sometimes there are 2 or 3 of those depending.
You've kind of taken from your presentation, and there's some coming in right now that we can address as well. But how about we start with some of the backlog questions, and
Sure,
then jump
absolutely.
over to some of these current ones that have come in. So if you have questions, feel free to chat them in. We have about 10 minutes, I think, 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. So first question, what criteria do you use to grade student write-ups? Do you have a rubric to grade them? Since each brand voice can be vastly different.
Yes, that was one of the hardest parts actually for me when I developed the assignments, realizing what would be a fair and balanced way to grade this for different voice. So one of the main aspects is we always use the term best practices as kind of a giveaway, because before they complete any assignment, we always have the lecture base. The lecture basis covers all best practices, which we collect and identify. And what has to happen is we say that the post has to fit best practices that we talked about in relationship to your brand. And that's where the brand write-up comes in. I then tell them that I have to be able to connect your brand write-up to your justification for your post. So there also has to be a justification. They have to write why they selected the words they did, why they put it in frame that they did. It does make the job a little bit harder for me because I actually have to go and check every brand before I grade it. Some of the brands I'm familiar with already. Many of them select brands that I know of, and so it's not an issue. For example, when they pick Wendy's, very familiar with that brand voice, it's not even an issue. But when they pick someone that's local, for example, I've only lived here for a short time. We have a lot of local brands, that, especially coffee shops, very popular here. Then I have to do a quick checkup. But for those of us who've been teaching this for a long time, it becomes a lot easier for us to identify it. So we're able to do that. And of course, I always open it up to disagreements. If any student should disagree with me with that, we have a discussion. So it does make the grading process a little bit longer, but I have found it to be a little bit more worthwhile in terms of the student actually, well, first of all, taking writing more seriously than they did before. And secondly, playing more with their writing afterwards, and especially brand writing.
this individual may have missed this, but where do you have students post their work? Do you have a specific place for them? Do they create their own blog or website, or do you have something that you have created for them?
Yeah, great question, actually. So I do have a sandbox. Everything is sandbox because of FERPA regulations. And also we find that some students are kind of iffy about posting stuff publicly on their own accounts, and some of their own accounts don't really look that great to begin with as well. And that's many of them end up choosing that as their final. But we do have sandbox accounts. So we actually have New Mav Media, and at New Mav Media should be all of our accounts. It's public, so anyone can feel free to go and see what they've been posting and working on and doing. So that's our sandbox account. So anything that has to be posted, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we have all of those, goes there. I'm now forcing them, we will add a TikTok. I saw Dr. Sutherland has a TikTok, and of course we're adding that. Groans for that one. They'd much rather do blog posts more than TikTok. So I don't know if that's a win for writing, but there's that. But we'll definitely add that too. So yes, you definitely have to provide a safe space for them, if you will, to post. A place where it can be generally anonymous sometimes too. So I don't require them to post their names to their posts because they submit their links in a Dropbox online. Even though it's an on-site class, we have we have a MOOC system that we work with. So I have all of my submissions be online submissions. And so that means that they don't have to post their names. Facebook is the only place we have this problem, where it'll sometimes put their names with the post, but most students haven't minded it. And for those who have, we've worked out other ways around it. But yes, absolutely. New Mav Media is what we create there. Before they can post on any of our official mass communication websites or social, they have to first show practice and ability on that. New Mav Media.
Great. Do you incorporate accessibility into any of this? Are you making that aware or teaching any of that?
In terms of accessibility, we haven't had too many issues with that ourselves. The one thing I have been working on, however, is multiple languages. So, for example, while English is the predominant language at this university, I myself come from another country. I'm from South Africa. I speak 2 languages. I am multilingual. And I've understood that the social media world and the kind of jobs that you can get isn't just English-centric. And so I do open it up to my students to not just select English language brands. I've had students who picked Spanish McDonald's, for example. One was from, I believe it was McDonald's, Mexico, that they selected specifically. And then I've had students who are also from different countries who have selected places that they either know of or want to work from. Now that requires a little bit more detail. For example, I have to tell them that when they come and present, they must also present for us the basics of the grammar and punctuation for that language. So it's a little bit more work for them in terms of explaining it to us. But I found it to be super beneficial because when we talk about, for example, French grammar versus English, and when you're writing for French versus English, students will actually be accentuating English grammar rules, syntax, and tone rules. And in explaining what's changed for the Spanish or French, we get a lot of Spanish, for example, examples that come up there. So it's been pretty interesting that they're actually working with English concepts and writing concepts, even when they have to present or are presenting for me something else in a different language. When it comes to the posts, however, it's a little bit more difficult for me, but I've managed. Usually I'll do a Google Translate, but for the most part, the students have to do a little bit of extra work where if they select another language, they have to write down another paragraph for me telling me the basic rules of grammar, punctuation, and then how they changed it. And then if I have the opportunity, I'll get it checked with a colleague of mine. We have the Spanish department just right down the corridor. And usually I have a wide variety of other foreign speaking language colleagues who I grab to just double check a few things that if I don't know it.
Clarify what you mean by sandbox for those who aren't familiar.
Oh, yes, sure. I'm sorry about that. So sandbox is what I call their play. It's their play place. And for me, social media, whether it's writing, video, audio, all of it's about getting a place to practice. to just post where there's no consequences necessarily while they still get grades. Oftentimes I'll tell students they can just post whatever they want to when they're practicing on those social media platforms. So we have New Mad Media Facebook, New Mad Media Instagram, and New Mad Media Twitter. We'll also be expanding. We do have a New Mad Media YouTube, not use that often. We'll be expanding to TikTok. And what that is it's a class branded page that doesn't really affect anything else that they do. It's not for our department, it's just for the class. And it's just a place where they can post their assignments without having to worry about my friends seeing it, my family, what about for my boss that I'm posting, or things like that. And so that's what I call a sandbox. It's literally like kids when you went into a play place and they had these sandboxes that you could jump in and create castles and kick sand into other people's eyes. Not that I ever did that, but I've heard stories. So, but we have fair play sandbox rules. So even for myself, I tell my students when I'm consulting or doing my own work, I have my own sandboxes to go and test things before I post something to see how it plays. Oftentimes too, when I'm struggling with writing, I don't just want to play on my own open branded channels. I go to a closed private channel where sometimes I'll just write nonsense until something comes up. And it's better for me to write it in the platform than it is to, for example, write it in, let's say, Microsoft Word. Because I'll immediately want to write long form in Word, whereas on Twitter, for example, we write a lot more short form. Even though people can have 280 characters, that whole short form meme talk, the text talking, became popular on Twitter because of the 140 character limit. So you had to get creative with grammar. You had to get creative with the kinds of words that you utilize in order to fit that 140 characters. And even though it's expanded to 280, most of us are still, especially people like me, I'm stuck in that. I only have 140. I've only now recently written in paragraph forms on that 280 format. And so now mine look more like little mini blog posts, micro blogs. But a sandbox, I'm sorry, I see here a sandbox in D2L. We do actually use D2L, but I don't have the sandbox in there. The sandboxes are always created, because for us, we cannot incorporate Facebook into the D2L, so we create our own pages. We do have one closed private Facebook page, but New Mad Media, it's essentially open so that other people can see it. Also for us, later when we get to data and collecting data, we use New Mad Media posts to kind of build on that as the lecture. So for us, that sandbox is outside of D2L. Blog posts, they also happen. We use WordPress. And I think most people actually use WordPress. Most popular choice, has the best chance of showing students how to grow. But we are playing with different ideas. Currently, there's some students who've asked about Medium, which is interesting because the types of blog posts, it brought us to a great conversation of tone and style in blogging platforms, because Medium is an interesting tone and style to WordPress blogs. So that's been fascinating to do that. And yes, Jerry, you can access those sandboxes. Actually, I'll be sure to post on my social media on at @lventa, L_Venta at Twitter. I'll go ahead and post where that New Mad Media Twitter is. And that should be the same on all platforms.
Great. I think there are just a couple of kind of detailed questions, and maybe we'll end with that because those will probably be pretty easy to answer. As far as account access, do you just let every student have username and password to log in?
Yes, and that's what yes, we do. And we've run into some issues with that recently with Instagram, a lot more with the privacy settings and their concerns about spam. The different IP accounts, different IP numbers for different students has sometimes caused us some issues. But the that in case you lose access to your account, the renewal access is always my email. So anytime there's an issue, I always get notified. I am the core email notifier or renewal for every single one. We did create our own Gmail account, EV Emoji Media, for all of these so that the students can access them as well. For example, if there's an issue and I'm away at a conference, I'm like, okay, go access the Gmail and go set it up. And they've done that, no problem. So that takes a little bit of work just to get around that. We've never had an issue with Twitter multiple access points. And Facebook, because Facebook utilizes it with the different students are added as editors onto a page, we haven't had an issue there because Facebook doesn't see it as independent logging in. The only places they have to do logins is for WordPress, Twitter, and Instagram. And sometimes it's issues, but other times it's really not.
Okay, great. That is all the time we have with Q&A today. There's still a few questions, but most people are just interested in your email address, and they want to pick your brain. So it looks like your email address is right here. And so,
yeah, and I'm open to anyone. Feel free to email me or on my Twitter. Always happy to chat there too, anytime.
Great. Hey, Elaine, thank you so much for sharing this. This is such a cool project and assignment.
Thanks so much. It's still a work in progress, but
like everything else, right? Yep.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Elaine.